The full moon illuminated the towers of Valdris Castle with a silvery cold glow. In the depths of the palace, where daylight rarely reached, Lysandra scrubbed the stone kitchen floor with calloused, tired hands. The silence of the night was broken only by the distant echo of voices in the upper corridors where nobles discussed matters of war. Lysandra sighed. Another day of hard work was coming to an end. Her knees ached, her back complained, but she continued. It was what she had always done. It was what a servant should do. As she passed the wet cloth over the ancient stones, her fingers began to trace shapes on the damp floor. It wasn't intentional. Her thoughts wandered far away, lost in memories of her mother, of simpler times, of a childhood that seemed to have existed in another life. Curved lines, intertwined circles, symbols that her mind created without her noticing. Suddenly the drawing glowed. Lysandra blinked, confused. A faint golden light emanated from the marks she had traced, pulsing like a living heart. She recoiled in fright, knocking over the water bucket. The liquid spread across the floor, but the symbol remained there, glowing for a few more moments before disappearing completely. Her heart raced. That wasn't natural. That shouldn't exist. By the ancient gods. A hoarse voice murmured behind her. Lysandra turned abruptly and saw Malin, the king's old advisor, standing in the kitchen entrance. His wide eyes were fixed on the floor where the symbol had glowed. His wrinkled face was as pale as the moon outside. "Did you see?" Lysandra whispered, trembling. I don't know what happened. I was just cleaning and—" Malin approached slowly, as if before something sacred. He knelt on the wet floor, ignoring his noble robes, and touched the stone with reverence. "The symbol of Etheron," he murmured. "It hasn't been seen for generations. Girl, do you have any idea what you just did?" Lysandra shook her head, tears threatening to fall. She knew stories. She knew what happened to different people, to those who did strange things. Her own mother. "Don't be afraid," Malin said, rising. His eyes now gleamed with urgency. "But we need to talk. The kingdom is on the brink of war with Thornmere, and what you just drew may be our only hope." Outside, in the highest towers, drums of war began to sound. "And you? Have you ever witnessed something inexplicable that changed everything? Leave in the comments what you think Lysandra will discover about her mysterious gift." Lysandra couldn't sleep that night. Malin's words echoed in her mind like warning bells. The advisor had departed hastily, leaving her alone with a million questions and no answers. When the sun rose over Valdris, the servant was exhausted but punctual in her duties. She was peeling potatoes in the kitchen when a shadow blocked the window light. It was Malin again, accompanied by 2 guards. "Come with me," he ordered with a firm but gentle voice. "What I need to tell you cannot be said here." Lysandra followed him through corridors she had never walked, climbing staircases reserved for nobility. The other servants watched her with a mixture of envy and fear. Some nobles frowned at seeing her pass, as if her mere presence contaminated the expensive carpets. Malin led her to an isolated tower where ancient books and yellowed scrolls occupied every inch of the walls. He closed the heavy door and finally spoke. "Lysandra, what you possess is called prophetic vision, an extremely rare gift, granted only to a few chosen ones in each generation. Those who possess it can draw symbols that reveal hidden truths, warnings of destiny, paths that have not yet been walked." The servant felt her legs weaken. This can't be true. I'm just a servant," Malin interrupted, his penetrating eyes fixed on her. "Your blood doesn't define your gifts, girl. The gods don't care about titles or crowns. They choose who should carry their messages." He unrolled an ancient scroll on the table. It was the same symbol Lysandra had traced on the kitchen floor. Etheron, the flame of truth. This symbol appears only when great danger approaches. And danger, my dear, is exactly what we have. Malin pointed through the window, where soldiers were gathering in the castle courtyard. "King Aldrich believes that Thornmere plans to attack us. Intercepted messages, troop movements at the border, diplomatic insults. Everything points to war. But what does this have to do with me? Lysandra asked, her voice trembling. Everything. Malin slammed his hand on the table. Because perhaps this war is exactly what someone wants, and your gift can show us the truth before it's too late. At that moment, trumpets sounded in the courtyard. Lysandra and Malin ran to the window and saw an imposing scene. Young King Aldric, dressed in golden armor, mounted his black horse. Around him, thousands of soldiers aligned in battle formation. Red and gold banners fluttered in the wind. Men of Valdris, the king's powerful voice echoed throughout the castle. Thornmere has challenged our honor. They have stepped on our lands, threatened our people, spat on our history. There will be no peace until this offense is washed with blood. The soldiers raised their swords and shouted in unison. The sound was deafening, full of fury and thirst for vengeance. Lysandra felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Malin gripped her shoulder firmly. You need to draw again, Lysandra. You need to show us what is hidden. The kingdom depends on this. Thousands of lives depend on this. She looked at her simple hands, stained with dirt and calluses. How could something so important depend on her? But deep down, somewhere hidden in her soul, something was awakening. A spark. A calling. I'll try, she whispered. Night fell over Valdris like a heavy blanket of unease. Malin had prepared everything carefully. Candles arranged in a circle, incense of ancient herbs burning in bronze braziers, and in the center, an empty space on the polished stone floor of the tower. Lysandra knelt, her hands trembling. Beside her, a bucket with clean water and white cloths. Malin watched in silence, his lips moving in silent prayers. Breathe deeply, he instructed gently. Let your mind wander. Don't force anything. The gift will come when it's ready. Lysandra closed her eyes. She dove into her deepest memories, into that place where she kept the image of her mother, her dark braided hair, her delicate hands drawing shapes in the air while humming forgotten songs. Could her mother have had this gift too? Could that be why? Her hands began to move. Lysandra's fingers glided across the wet stone with a will of their own, tracing lines, curves, symbols that she didn't understand but that sprang from some ancestral place within her. Sweat dripped down her forehead. Her heart accelerated. Images began to invade her mind like lightning, a dagger hidden in noble robes, scrolls being burned, gold coins changing hands in dark corridors, a hooded face whispering poison in the king's ears. Lysandra gasped and opened her eyes. The symbol was complete. Malin approached quickly, his face turning livid at seeing the drawing. It was a snake coiled around a crown, with two heads pointing in opposite directions. The symbol of double betrayal. By all the gods, he whispered, horrified. There's a traitor among us. I saw. Lysandra tried to catch her breath. I saw someone manipulating the king, but I couldn't see the face. There were shadows. Very dark. And the tower door exploded open. General Kalen entered like a storm, followed by 3 armed guards. His cold eyes examined the scene with contempt. So, the rumors are true. The advisor brought a witch to the castle. She's not a witch. Malin stepped forward, protecting Lysandra. She possesses a sacred gift that can save this kingdom. Kalen laughed cruelly. Gift? I see only a dirty servant scribbling on the floor and an old fool who has lost his reason. He pointed to the symbol. What does this mean? Another of your empty prophecies? It means, Malin responded with a grave voice, that someone within this castle is plotting against Valdris. Someone wants this war, and not for honor or justice. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. Kalen narrowed his eyes dangerously. Careful with your words, Malin. Accusing nobles of treason without proof is a crime punishable by death. He turned to the guards. Spread the news. There's a woman practicing witchcraft in the advisor's tower. Let everyone be alert. No, Lysandra shouted, standing up. I'm not a witch. Please, you must believe. There's something wrong with this war. Something everyone is ignoring. But Kalen had already left, and with him, the hope of being heard. In the following hours, Whispers spread through the castle like fire in dry straw. The servant was a witch. The advisor was senile. Nobles gathered in groups, looking at each other suspiciously. Who was the traitor? Who could it be? Lysandra was locked in her quarters in the tower, guarded day and night. Malin tried to get an audience with King Aldrich, but was denied. The king was too busy planning the invasion. That night, alone in her room, Lysandra looked through the narrow window and saw the torches of soldiers marching. Thousands of them, going to a war that perhaps didn't need to happen. And she, the only person who could change this, was imprisoned. A tear rolled down her face. 3 days passed. 3 long days in which Lysandra remained confined in the tower, watching through the window as the castle prepared for war. Soldiers marched, forges worked without stopping, and the smell of hot metal and sweat permeated the air. On the morning of the 4th day, Malin finally managed to visit her. The old advisor entered the room with heavy steps, carrying the weight of secrets that could no longer be kept. He sat in a wooden chair and remained silent for a long moment, as if gathering courage. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Something about your mother." Lysandra felt her heart tighten. She rarely spoke about her mother. The pain was still alive, even after so many years. "You were very young when it happened," Malin continued, staring at his own wrinkled hands. "Perhaps you don't remember many details, but I remember. I was there." "There? Where?" Lysandra asked, her voice almost a whisper. "On the day your mother was executed." The words fell like stones in the silence of the room. Lysandra felt the air escape from her lungs. She knew her mother had died young, knew there was something terrible about her death, but the details had always been hidden from her. Malin stood and walked to the window. Her name was Morella, and she was extraordinary. She possessed the same gift as you, Lysandra. She served the old king, Aldrich's father, as a seer. Her vision saved the kingdom countless times. She prevented plagues, betrayals, invasions. Then why? Lysandra couldn't finish the question. "Because she saw something she shouldn't have seen," Malin replied, turning to her with teary eyes. "A conspiracy among powerful nobles. She drew the symbols, showed the king, but the conspirators were too influential. They accused her of witchcraft, of inventing lies to gain power. And the king, pressured from all sides, had to make a choice. He chose the nobles," Lysandra completed, feeling bile rise in her throat. "He chose the stability of the kingdom," Malin corrected, but his voice carried regret. Or so he thought. Morella was executed in the square, burned as a witch, before a crowd that screamed for her death. "You were only 5 years old. I held you in my arms while—" He didn't need to finish. Lysandra stood abruptly, moving away from him. Anger, pain, and confusion mixed in her chest like a storm. "You watched my mother die and did nothing?" "I was only a junior advisor," Malin exclaimed, desperate. "I had no power to save her. But after that day I swore to protect you. I ensured you were cared for, that you had a place in the castle, even if it was as a servant. I watched over you all these years, waiting, fearing, that the gift would awaken. And now that it has awakened," Lysandra said bitterly, "my fate will be the same as hers." Malin approached and gripped her shoulders firmly. "No, not if you prove the value of your visions before it's too late. Your destiny doesn't have to be the same as Morella's." At that moment, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. The door opened and 2 royal guards entered, followed by King Aldrich himself. The young monarch was tall and imposing, his blue eyes cold as ice. He examined Lysandra with curiosity and skepticism. "So this is the witch everyone's talking about," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "She's not a witch, Your Majesty." Malin bowed respectfully. "She's a seer, like her mother before her." Aldrich frowned. "Morella?" "Yes, I heard stories. My father executed her for treason." He approached Lysandra, studying her. "Tell me, servant, do you see the future?" Lysandra swallowed hard but kept her gaze steady. "I see hidden truths, Your Majesty, and I see that this war is not what it seems. A cold smile appeared on the king's lips. Interesting. He turned to Malin. Very well. She can continue her drawings, but under constant surveillance. If her visions prove false, she will have the same end as her mother. If they're true. He paused. Perhaps I'll spare her. With that, the king left, leaving Lysandra trembling but still alive, still with a chance. Lysandra was taken to a large room in the heart of the castle, where the royal council met. Nobles in luxurious robes watched her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. General Kalen was present, his arms crossed and expression heavy with disapproval. In the center of the room, King Aldrich sat on his throne, waiting. "Show us then," he ordered, pointing to the polished marble floor. "Show us this hidden truth you speak of." Lysandra knelt, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes upon her. Her hands trembled. If she failed now, if nothing happened, her life would end the same way as her mother's. But she couldn't think about that. She needed to concentrate. She closed her eyes and dove deep into herself, into that place where visions dwelled. She wet her hands in a basin of water and began to draw. The lines flowed naturally as if guided by a force beyond her understanding. Circles intertwined, ancient symbols emerged, and then the vision struck her with devastating force. 2 kingdoms in flames. Thornmere and Valdris burning under the same fire. But the fire didn't come from either of them. It came from a third place, hidden in the shadows. A kingdom of black mountains and gray skies. Obsidian. And on its throne, a man with empty eyes and a cruel smile manipulated invisible strings, like a puppeteer controlling marionettes. Lysandra gasped and fell backward, exhausted. The symbol was complete on the floor. 3 intertwined crowns, but 2 of them cracked and bleeding, while the third remained intact and victorious. Malin approached quickly, his eyes wide. The triangle of manipulation, by all the gods. "What does this mean?" Aldrich asked, rising from the throne. "It means, Your Majesty," Malin explained with a grave voice, "that this war with Thornmere is a farce. Both kingdoms are being manipulated by a third power. Obsidian." A murmur ran through the room. Nobles exchanged alarmed looks. "Absurd!" Kalen thundered, stepping forward. "Obsidian is a distant kingdom in the northern mountains. They've never involved themselves in our disputes." "Exactly why they're the perfect enemy," Malin countered. "No one would suspect. While Valdris and Thornmere destroy each other, Obsidian waits to pick up the pieces." Lysandra forced herself to speak, still dizzy from the vision. I saw false letters, intercepted messages, lying diplomats. Someone has been planting discord between our kingdoms. Someone wants us to fight." "This is madness." Kalen turned to the king. "Your Majesty, you cannot listen to these fantasies. We have real evidence of Thornmere's betrayal. Their soldiers invaded our lands, their messengers insulted us. This is not invention." "It's not invention," Lysandra agreed, standing with difficulty. "But it may have been planned provocation. Think, General. What if those soldiers were sent purposely? What if those insults were written by other hands?" Kalen clenched his fists, his face red with fury. "You dare question my military intelligence? I, who have served this kingdom for 30 years? I, who have bled on its borders?" He approached Lysandra threateningly. "You're nothing but a frightened servant trying to sabotage our war out of cowardice. You were probably bought by Thornmere to sow doubts in our ranks." "General, restrain yourself," Malin intervened, placing himself between the two. But the damage was done. The nobles began to whisper among themselves. Some agreed with Kalen. Others seemed shaken by Lysandra's visions. The room divided into factions, voices rising in heated discussion. King Aldrich raised his hand, demanding silence. "Enough," his voice echoed off the walls. Everyone fell silent instantly. The king descended the throne steps and walked to Lysandra, studying her intensely. "Your visions are intriguing," he admitted. "But visions are not proof. I need concrete evidence before abandoning a war that's at our doorstep." He turned to Malin. "Keep her alive and watched. let her continue drawing. But, General Kalen, he looked at his commander. Proceed with preparations. In 3 days, we march to Thornmere. Your Majesty, no, Lysandra shouted. Please give me time to prove it. If we march now, we'll be falling exactly into the trap Obsidian has prepared. Aldrich stopped and looked at her over his shoulder. Then you have 3 days to bring me proof, servant. 3 days to save 2 kingdoms. With that, he left the room, followed by the nobles and General Kalen, who cast one last look of pure hatred at Lysandra. When they were alone, Malin gripped the young woman's shoulders. 3 days, Lysandra. How will we get proof in 3 days? She looked at her hands, still trembling from the vision. I don't know, but I have to try. Night fell over Valdris like a dark omen. Lysandra was in her room in the tower, watching through the window the frantic movement in the courtyard. Soldiers sharpened swords, horses were shod, provisions were loaded onto wagons. The kingdom was preparing for war. 3 days. That's all she had. A soft knock on the door startled her. Malin entered quickly, but he wasn't alone. A young knight accompanied him, tall and broad-shouldered, with brown hair and eyes that seemed to carry more kindness than a soldier should have. Lysandra, this is Leon, Malin introduced in a low voice. He believes in you. The knight bowed respectfully. I saw what happened in the hall. I heard your words, and something in me. Something tells me you're right. Why would you risk your position for me? Lysandra asked, suspicious. Leon sighed. Because my younger brother serves on the Thornmere border. If this war happens, he'll be one of the first to die. And if there's the slightest chance that all this is a lie, that he doesn't need to die for nothing. His voice failed. I need to know the truth. Malin closed the door and approached them. There's no time to search for proof here in Valdris. If Obsidian is really manipulating both kingdoms, then the same lies were planted in Thornmere. We need to go there. Go to Thornmere? Lysandra widened her eyes. But they're our enemies. They'd kill us before we even crossed the border. That's why you won't go alone, Leon said, placing his hand on his sword hilt. I'll protect you. I know secret routes through Shadowmere Forest. We can reach Thornmere's capital without being detected. This is madness, Lysandra whispered, but even as she said it, she knew there was no choice. Staying here drawing symbols wouldn't bring the concrete proof the king demanded. Malin placed a thick cloak over her shoulders. Madness is watching 2 kingdoms destroy each other while we have the power to prevent it. Go now, while the night still protects you. I'll cover your escape for as long as I can. An hour later, Lysandra and Leon were riding on the road leading to Shadowmere Forest. The moon was hidden by thick clouds, and the darkness was almost absolute. Only the sound of the horses' hooves broke the oppressive silence. I've never left Valdris, Lysandra confessed as they rode. Actually, I've never left the castle. Then prepare yourself, Leon responded darkly. The world beyond the walls is not kind. He was right. As they entered the forest, the temperature dropped drastically. Twisted, ancient trees blocked even the little light that remained. Branches creaked like breaking bones. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness between the trunks. Wolves? Lysandra asked, her voice trembling. Worse, Leon unsheathed his sword. Creatures corrupted by the dark magic that permeates this forest. Stay close to me. A howl tore through the night, then another, and more. Suddenly, black shapes emerged from the shadows. They weren't ordinary wolves, but deformed beasts with blackened fur and fangs that dripped something viscous and poisonous. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger. Leon spurred his horse. Ride! Don't stop for anything! Lysandra clung to the reins as her horse bolted down the narrow trail. The creatures pursued them, their claws scraping stones, their growls filling the air. One of them jumped, almost reaching Lysandra's leg, but Leon cut it down midair with a precise blow. There! He pointed to a clearing ahead where ancient ruins stood. Sacred ground! They can't follow us! They galloped desperately to the ruins. The moment they crossed the circle of ancient stones, the creatures stopped abruptly, growling in frustration but unable to continue. Lysandra dismounted, her legs almost giving out. Leon checked their horses, ensuring they weren't injured. "What were those things?" she gasped. "Forest guardians," Leon replied, cleaning his sword. "Someone doesn't want people crossing to Thornmere. More proof that something much bigger is happening." They rested briefly in the ruins but didn't dare sleep. At dawn, they resumed their journey. The second day was even worse. They encountered a patrol of Valdris soldiers hunting deserters. Leon had to use all his skill to mislead his former comrades in arms. They hid in damp caves, crossed freezing rivers, climbed treacherous cliffs. On the third night, they finally spotted Thornmere's towers on the horizon. "We've arrived," Leon said, but his voice carried no relief. "Now comes the really dangerous part." Lysandra looked at the enemy kingdom, her heart tight. Somewhere within those walls was the truth that could save thousands of lives, or condemn her to death. The infiltration into Thornmere didn't go as planned. Lysandra and Leon had waited for nightfall to approach the city walls. Disguised as peasants, they tried to pass through the gates with a merchant caravan. But the guards were on maximum alert, searching every wagon, interrogating every traveler. "Documents!" a guard demanded, his hand on his sword hilt. Leon improvised quickly, offering coins and false stories. But another guard recognized the partially hidden emblem on his armor beneath the cloak. "Valdris!" he shouted. "Spies from Valdris!" What followed was chaos. Leon fought bravely, taking down 3 guards before more soldiers arrived. Lysandra tried to flee but was grabbed by strong hands. They found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, with no hope of escape. "Surrender or die," the guard captain ordered, a dozen spears pointed at them. Leon looked at Lysandra, defeat in his eyes, and dropped his sword. They were dragged through the streets of Thornmere, chained like criminals. The population watched them with hatred, spitting and shouting insults. Children threw stones. Old people cursed their names. Spies from Valdris, assassins, burn them. Lysandra had never felt so much fear. This wasn't how it should happen. They came seeking truth, but now would die before even trying. They were taken to Thornmere Castle, an imposing fortress of gray stone and towers sharp as blades, through freezing corridors and endless staircases, until finally being thrown into a large audience hall. And there, on a throne of black iron, was she. Princess Seraphine of Thornmere was unlike anything Lysandra had imagined. Young, perhaps a few years older than herself, with long silver hair braided in a warrior style. Her eyes were an intense green, penetrating like a sword's blade. She wore partial armor over a crimson dress, a warrior queen in training. "So these are the spies Valdris sent," Seraphine said, her voice cold and calculated. "Pathetic. I was expecting trained assassins, not a servant and a clumsy knight." "We're not spies," Lysandra shouted, forcing herself to stand despite the chains. "We came seeking the truth." Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "Truth? What interesting truth would a kingdom planning to invade us seek in our lands?" "The same truth you should be seeking," Leon intervened, his tone respectful but firm. "Princess Seraphine, with all respect, both our kingdoms are being manipulated." "Manipulated?" Seraphine descended from her throne, approaching them like a predator studying its prey. "By whom?" Lysandra took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Obsidian." The silence that followed was absolute. The guards exchanged nervous glances. An elderly advisor beside the throne visibly paled. Seraphine stopped, her eyes fixed on Lysandra. "Continue." "I have a gift," Lysandra explained quickly. "I can draw prophetic symbols that reveal hidden truths. My visions showed that a third kingdom is planting discord between Valdris and Thornmere. False letters, fabricated insults, planned provocations, all to make us war while they wait to conquer what's left." "This is absurd," a general from Thornmere thundered. "Obsidian has never involved itself in our disputes." "Exactly," Leon countered. "The perfect enemy is one no one suspects." Seraphine studied Lysandra for a long moment, then, surprisingly, turned to her guards. "Bring me the scrolls from the ancient library. Prophecies and Arcane Symbols section. Minutes later, dusty books and yellowed scrolls were brought. Seraphine examined them quickly, turning pages with growing urgency. Suddenly she stopped. "Show me," she ordered Lysandra. "Show me these symbols you speak of." Lysandra looked at her chained hands. Seraphine gestured and the guards freed her, though Leon remained imprisoned. With trembling fingers, Lysandra wet her hand in a cup of water and began to draw on the marble floor. The symbol emerged again, 3 intertwined crowns, 2 cracked. Seraphine compared the drawing with an ancient scroll. Her face lost color. "The triangle of manipulation," she whispered. "My grandmother showed me this symbol when I was a child. She said it appeared before the Great War, when 3 kingdoms almost destroyed each other through external conspiracies." She looked at Lysandra with new intensity. You really see?" "I see," Lysandra confirmed. "And I saw more. I saw letters arriving at both kingdoms, always anonymous, always inflammatory. I saw a man from Obsidian laughing as he watched you march to war." Seraphine walked to a table and picked up a sealed envelope. "I received this 3 weeks ago. An anonymous letter claiming Valdris planned to assassinate my family and conquer our lands. This is what convinced my father to mobilize our troops. And we received reports that soldiers from Thornmere invaded our lands and massacred villagers," Leon added. "But what if those soldiers were never really from Thornmere?" The elderly advisor approached Seraphine. "Your Highness, there's something I must confess. Months ago, an ambassador from Obsidian was at our court, Lord Malachar. He offered assistance, showed support, but always talked about Valdris. He planted doubts, mentioned ancient offenses, recalled past conflicts. The same man was in Valdris," Lysandra revealed. "Malin told me. Always present, always helpful, always whispering." Seraphine clenched her fists, contained anger burning in her green eyes. "We were fools. Manipulated like pieces on a board." She turned to her generals. "Send messengers immediately. I want every suspicious letter, every strange report, every document mentioning Obsidian or border events. Now." Then she looked at Lysandra and Leon. "You risked your lives to bring me this truth. For that, you won't die as spies." She paused. "But you also can't return alone. Valdris needs to know this." "Then you'll come with us?" Leon asked, hopeful. Seraphine smiled for the first time, a fierce and determined smile. "I'll do better. I'll prevent a war." Will Princess Seraphine be able to convince Valdris of the truth? What will Lord Malachar do when he discovers his plan has been revealed? Comment and share to continue this epic journey. The library of Thornmere Castle remained illuminated throughout the night. Lysandra, Leon, and Princess Seraphine worked feverishly, surrounded by piles of documents, letters, and reports. Each piece of the puzzle they discovered made the conspiracy clearer and more terrifying. "Look at this." Seraphine held up a letter sealed with black wax. "This arrived 6 months ago, claiming Valdris was forming a secret alliance with the southern kingdoms to surround us. My father almost declared war that very day." Lysandra examined another letter, her fingers trembling as she recognized the refined calligraphy. "This one is almost identical to one that arrived to King Aldrich, but the content is inverted. It accused Thornmere of conspiring against Valdris. All written by the same hand," Leon observed, comparing the documents. "Someone very skilled at imitating different styles, but there are small details that repeat. The angle of this letter or, the way the ias ends." Advisor Edric, the elderly man who had served Thornmere for decades, joined them with a dusty ledger. "I found something disturbing. Lord Malachar of Obsidian visited our court 17 times in the last 2 years. Each visit coincides exactly with an incident at the border or the arrival of an inflammatory letter. The same pattern in Valdris," Lysandra confirmed, remembering conversations with Malin. "He was always present at the right moments, offering advice, showing concern, but always directing suspicions toward Thornmere." Seraphine slammed her fist on the table. "He's not just an ambassador. He's an architect of war, a master of manipulation." "But why?" Leon asked. What's Obsidian's final objective? Lysandra closed her eyes, allowing her gift to guide her. She didn't draw this time, but images came to her mind like fragments of a nightmare. Land, she whispered. Obsidian is a kingdom of barren mountains, with little fertile soil. They don't have resources to sustain their people. But Valdris and Thornmere. She opened her eyes, horror growing in her voice. We have vast fields, abundant rivers, rich forests. If we destroyed each other, they would simply march over the ruins and take everything, Seraphine completed, her voice laden with contained fury, without fighting a single real battle, letting us do the dirty work. Edric unrolled an ancient map on the table, and look at the strategic position. If Obsidian controlled both Valdris and Thornmere, they would dominate the entire western region. They'd be unstoppable. We need more proof, Leon insisted. Proof that can't be denied or questioned. King Aldrich is stubborn. General Kalen is thirsty for war. They won't accept just our word. Seraphine thought for a moment. Then her eyes gleamed with determination. The border reports. If false soldiers attacked villages posing as Thornmere troops, there must be inconsistencies. Different armor, strange tactics, something that doesn't fit. She called one of her captains. Bring me all reports of attacks in recent weeks. I want details about uniforms, weapons, everything. While they waited, Lysandra made new drawings on the floor. The symbols that emerged were increasingly urgent, showing armies in movement, shadows converging, time running out. They're already moving, she warned. Malachar knows time is short. Obsidian's troops must be marching now. Hours later, the captain returned with a pile of reports. Seraphine read them quickly, her expression becoming increasingly somber. Here, she pointed to a section. A surviving villager described that the attackers wore Thornmere armor, but the swords were Northern Forge. Our swords are always marked with the Central Forge's royal seal. And here, Leon found another report. The attackers shouted in our language, but with a strange accent, as if they had learned the words but weren't natives. Mercenaries, Seraphine concluded. Hired by Obsidian, dressed in our colors, trained to provoke conflict. Edric brought another crucial discovery. I found financial records. Lord Malachar made generous donations to certain nobles in both courts. Nobles who, curiously, were the most vocal in demanding war. Bribes, Lysandra felt nauseous. He bought influence within our own kingdoms. Seraphine organized all the documents, letters, reports, and evidence on the table. It was a mountain of irrefutable proof of Obsidian's conspiracy. We have enough, she declared. Now we need to take this to Valdris before it's too late. My father mobilized the troops 3 days ago, Leon remembered, worry in his voice. They must be less than a day's march from the border. If they meet Thornmere's forces, then we have no time to lose. Seraphine turned to her generals. Prepare my horse and an elite escort. We'll ride to Valdris immediately. Your Highness, Edric protested. It's too dangerous. You'd be considered invaders. Which is why I'll carry a white flag of truce, Seraphine replied, already walking toward the armory. And I'll also carry this proof. If Valdris executes me for trying to save both kingdoms, so be it. Lysandra felt admiration grow in her chest. The princess who should be her enemy was risking everything for peace. I'll draw, Lysandra offered. During the journey, I'll make symbols that show our sincerity, that prove there's no betrayal in our hearts. Seraphine gripped her hand firmly. You've already proven that by coming here. Now let's save our kingdoms together. At dawn, a delegation departed from Thornmere. Princess Seraphine led, alongside Lysandra and Leon, followed by 20 elite knights carrying white flags. They rode as if their lives depended on it, because they really did. The return journey was a desperate race against destiny. Lysandra, Leon, and Princess Seraphine rode without rest, changing mounts every few hours to maintain the brutal pace. The elite knights from Thornmere who accompanied them were experienced warriors, but even they showed signs of exhaustion. We're close, Leon announced when the sun rose on the third day. Valdris is beyond that hill. But when they reached the top, what they saw made their hearts sink. Valdris Castle was surrounded, not by Thornmere troops, but by an army no one expected. Black flags with a silver dragon fluttered in the wind. Thousands of soldiers in dark armor formed a complete siege around the castle. "Obsidian?" Seraphine whispered, horror in her voice. "They anticipated us." Malachar. Lysandra felt bile rise in her throat. He knew. He knew we'd discover and acted first. From inside the castle, smoke rose. Sounds of battle echoed in the distance. The kingdom was under attack. "We need to get in," Leon declared, but his voice carried desperation. "How will we get through that siege?" Seraphine studied the terrain, her military mind working quickly. "There's an ancient underground passage, used by the first kings to escape during sieges. The entrance is on the east side, hidden in the rocks." "How do you know this?" Leon asked, surprised. "Because there was a similar one in Thornmere." She smiled sadly. "Our kingdoms were built by the same architects centuries ago, when we were allies." They circled the siege, staying in the forests, until they found the rocks on the east side. There, hidden by vines and erosion, was an ancient stone door, almost invisible. Seraphine and Leon forced the door. With a painful creak, it gave way, revealing a dark tunnel descending into the depths. "You 20, Seraphine ordered her knights. "Stay here. If we don't return by nightfall, go back to Thornmere and prepare our defenses." "Your Highness," a captain protested. "It's an order," she cut him off. Then, in a softer voice, "If we fail here, Thornmere will need you." The three descended into the tunnel, using torches to light the way. The walls were ancient and damp, covered with moss and inscriptions worn by time. Their steps echoed ominously. "How long do you think they'll hold out?" Lysandra asked, referring to the siege above. "Not long," Leon replied darkly. "Valdris wasn't expecting an attack. Half the troops already marched to the border to meet Thornmere. The castle is vulnerable." After what seemed like an eternity in the depths, they found a stone staircase going up. At the top, another door, this one locked from inside. Leon knocked in a specific pattern. "It's the knight's emergency code, if there's anyone on the other side." Seconds dragged on. Then, sounds of locks being opened. The door creaked, and the tired, suspicious face of a Valdris guard appeared. "Leon!" He widened his eyes. You're alive? And..." His hand went to his sword, seeing Seraphine. "An enemy!" "Wait!" Lysandra shouted. "We need to see King Aldrich immediately. Thornmere is not the enemy. It's Obsidian. They're out there now." "I know they're out there," the guard replied bitterly. "We've been fighting for hours." "But why would I believe Thornmere isn't with them?" "Because I would risk my life coming here if we were." Seraphine stepped forward, removing her helmet. "I'm Princess Seraphine of Thornmere, and I bring proof that we've both been deceived." The guard hesitated, but Leon placed his hand on his shoulder. "Please, Gareth, for our friendship, for all the years we've served together, trust me now. Take us to the king." Gareth looked between the three, then sighed heavily. "May the gods forgive me if I'm wrong. Come, but my hands will stay on my sword." They ran through the castle corridors. Signs of battle were everywhere, walls stained with blood, destroyed furniture, wounded soldiers being carried to the infirmary. When they reached the throne room, they found a chaotic scene. King Aldrich was in full armor, a wound bleeding on his forehead. Malin was beside him, exhausted but alive, and General Kalen. General Kalen saw them, and his face contorted in absolute fury. "Traitors!" he roared, unsheathing his sword. "We knew you were spies, and now you bring the enemy to our very throne." "Kalen, no!" Malin shouted, but it was too late. The general advanced, his sword raised to strike Lysandra. Leon blocked the attack, metal clashing against metal with a shrill sound. "General, stop. She's not a traitor. None of us are." "Leon." Aldrich stood, shocked. "You were dead. They reported you deserted with the witch." "I didn't desert, Your Majesty," Leon replied, keeping his sword against Kalen's. "I went to seek the truth, and I found it." "Lies!" Kalen pushed Leon back. "You three are responsible for this. It was you who attracted Obsidian to our doors." "No!" Seraphine stepped forward, brave even surrounded by enemies. "It was Lord Malachar. He manipulated both kingdoms. We have proof." She threw on the floor the bag full of documents she had carried during the entire journey. Letters, reports, financial records scattered across the marble. Obsidian planned this for years, Seraphine continued, her voice strong and clear. They wanted us to destroy each other. My kingdom was also deceived. I came here not as an enemy, but as an ally. General Kalen is right about one thing, a new voice echoed through the hall. Everyone turned. In the shadows of a column, Lord Malachar emerged, clapping slowly. His eyes were cold as ice, his smile cruel and triumphant. I really did manipulate both, and it worked perfectly. But you three, he pointed at Lysandra, Leon, and Seraphine, you had to ruin my masterpiece. Valdris guards tried to grab him, but Malachar raised his hand. A dark energy emanated from his fingers, throwing the soldiers against the walls. He's a sorcerer, Malin whispered, horrified. I'm much more than that, Malachar laughed. And now, even though you've discovered my plan, it's too late. My armies are at your gates. Your troops are divided. And you... He looked directly at Lysandra. You will die knowing you failed. He raised both hands, and black energy began to accumulate, growing, about to be released in a destructive wave that would devastate everyone in the hall. Lysandra felt panic, felt despair. But she also felt something more, her gift, pulsing, calling her. Get down, she shouted. Lysandra fell to her knees on the marble floor, her hands touching the cold stone. There was no time for water, for preparation, for rituals, just pure instinct and desperation. Her fingers began to trace. Malachar's dark energy grew above them, a pulsing sphere of destruction about to explode. But while he channeled his spell, Lysandra drew with frantic speed, her gift flowing through her like never before. The symbol that emerged on the floor was different from all the previous ones. It wasn't prophecy or warning. It was pure protection, an ancestral shield her ancestors had used against forces of darkness. Golden light burst from the drawn lines. Malachar's explosion collided with the luminous barrier and was repelled, dissipating into black sparks that died in the air. The sorcerer recoiled, surprise and fury distorting his features. Impossible, he hissed. That gift shouldn't have that power. The power doesn't come from the gift. Malin stood, leaning heavily on his staff. His ancient advisor tattoos began to glow faintly. It comes from purity of purpose, something you never understood, Malachar. In that moment of distraction, King Aldrich acted. With the speed of a trained warrior, he threw his spear. The weapon cut through the air and hit Malachar's shoulder, piercing flesh and making him scream in pain. "Guards!" Aldrich roared. "Arrest him!" But Malachar, even wounded, wouldn't be captured so easily. He yanked out the spear with a howl of rage, black blood dripping from the wound. Gesturing with his hands, he conjured a dark mist that filled the hall, blinding everyone. When the mist dissipated seconds later, he had disappeared. "Your Majesty!" A soldier ran into the hall, breathless. "Obsidian's armies have retreated. They're withdrawing." "Retreated?" Kalen frowned, confused. "Why?" Lysandra understood immediately. "Because their leader is wounded and fleeing. Without Malachar to command them, they lost courage." "Or the Order," Seraphine added. "A sorcerer controlling entire armies. He must have used domination magic. With him weakened, the spell broke." Aldrich watched the Princess of Thornmere with calculating eyes. "So it's true. Everything you said is true." "Every word, Your Majesty," Leon confirmed. Obsidian manipulated both kingdoms. Thornmere never wanted war, just as Valdris was only defending its honor. Kalen, who had remained silent since Malachar's appearance, finally lowered his sword. His face was pale, his hands trembled slightly. His voice failed. "I pressed for war. I accused you of treason. He turned to Lysandra, and there were tears in his hardened veteran's eyes. "I almost killed you for trying to save the kingdom." He fell to his knees before Lysandra, removing his helmet and placing it on the floor in a gesture of absolute surrender. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive this old fool who let his pride blind his reason. You tried to save us from the beginning, and His voice broke. "I called you a witch." Lysandra felt tears burn her own eyes. She extended her hand and touched the general's shoulder. You were protecting your kingdom. There's nothing to forgive, General. There's everything to forgive. Kalen raised his eyes to her. But I swear now, before everyone, that I will dedicate what remains of my life to protecting you. With my sword, my blood, my honor. King Aldrich approached Seraphine, who had remained in a dignified but tense posture, aware she was still in enemy territory. Princess of Thornmere, he said formally, you risked your life to bring us the truth. You crossed hostile territory, entered the heart of your supposed enemy, all to prevent an unnecessary war. He made a deep bow, something a king rarely did for someone from another kingdom. Valdris is eternally indebted to you. Seraphine returned the bow, relieved. And Thornmere thanks Valdris for listening. Many kingdoms wouldn't have given this chance. Aldrich turned to observe the documents scattered on the floor. Malin was already organizing them, examining each piece of evidence meticulously. The evidence is irrefutable, the advisor declared. False letters, fabricated reports, documented bribes. Lord Malachar and Obsidian orchestrated every conflict between our kingdoms. Then we must unite, Aldrich declared, his voice resonating through the hall. Not just to defeat Obsidian, but to ensure we're never manipulated against each other again. I agree. Seraphine extended her hand. Let Valdris and Thornmere fight side by side. Aldrich gripped her hand firmly, and in that moment, centuries of distrust began to unravel. Your Majesty, a messenger entered running. The troops that were marching to the border have returned, and there's more. Troops from Thornmere have also been sighted, but under a peace flag. My father, Seraphine explained. I left instructions before departing. If I didn't return in 3 days, he should read the documents I left and come in peace. Then we have 2 armies. Kalen stood, recovering his military bearing. Valdris and Thornmere united. Obsidian may have retreated, but they'll return. We need to be ready. Aldrich nodded. Convene the War Council, representatives from both kingdoms. General Kalen, he looked at his commander. You'll lead our troops, alongside whoever Thornmere designates. Commander Gareth, Seraphine indicated one of her captains who had entered with the troops. He's my best strategist. The 2 warriors greeted each other with mutual respect. Then Aldrich turned to Lysandra, who had remained quiet, still kneeling where she had drawn the protection symbol. The king approached and extended his hand, helping her stand. You, he said solemnly, saved not 1, but 2 kingdoms today. Your gift, your courage, your determination to seek the truth even when everyone doubted. He paused, emotion evident in his voice. You are everything a leader should be. He looked at Malin. Summon all the nobles, all the citizens. I want them to witness what I will do now. In the following hours, the hall filled with people. Nobles from Valdris and Thornmere, soldiers, citizens, all crammed to witness. In the center, Lysandra stood before the throne. Let it be known by all, Aldrich proclaimed, his voice echoing off the walls, that Lysandra, daughter of Morella, bearer of the sacred gift, is this day elevated to the position of royal advisor of Valdris. Applause exploded, but the king raised his hand, asking for silence. And let it also be known that the accusation of witchcraft against her mother, Morella, is officially nullified and revoked. She was a heroine, unjustly executed. Her memory will be honored for generations. Malin approached with tears in his eyes, carrying a gold medallion. This belonged to your mother, he said softly, placing it around Lysandra's neck. She wore it when she served the old king. Now it's yours by right. Lysandra held the medallion, feeling the weight of history, of pain, and finally, of redemption. Preparations for the final battle began immediately. In the great courtyard of Valdris Castle, something unprecedented was happening. Soldiers from 2 kingdoms who days ago were ready to kill each other now trained side by side, shared meals, exchanged combat techniques. Lysandra watched from the tower, Leon beside her. I never thought I'd see this day, he said, smiling at seeing a Thornmere archer teaching his longbow to Valdris soldiers. My grandfather fought against Thornmere. My great-grandfather, too. And now? Now we fight together, Lysandra completed, against the real enemy. In the following days, messengers arrived constantly with news. Obsidian was regrouping. Lord Malachar, even wounded, was gathering his forces in the northern mountains. Spies reported he was conjuring increasingly dark spells, draining the very lives of his soldiers to feed his power. He's desperate, Malin analyzed the reports in the War Council. He knows his conspiracy has been revealed. Now he fights not for conquest, but for survival. Which makes him even more dangerous, King Aldric observed. A man with nothing to lose is capable of anything. Princess Seraphine studied maps spread on the table. He's fortified at the Iron Pass in the mountains. It's an almost impenetrable defensive position. High stone walls on both sides, only one narrow entrance path. A perfect trap, General Cailan growled. He wants us to attack there. We could lose half our men before even reaching him. Then we won't attack by the obvious path. Gareth, Thornmere's commander, traced an alternative line on the map. There's an ancient route through the cliffs on the west side. Dangerous, but possible for a small, agile force. A distraction, Leon understood. We attack from the front with the main force, while a smaller group scales the cliffs and attacks from behind. Exactly, Seraphine agreed. But who would lead this suicidal mission through the cliffs? I, Leon and Seraphine said simultaneously, then looked at each other surprised. I need both of you, Aldric decided. Leon, you know climbing and difficult terrain. Seraphine, your soldiers trust you unconditionally. Together, you'll lead the assault. And I'll go with them, Lysandra declared. No. Several voices protested at the same time. You're an advisor now, Aldric argued. Your place is here, safe, not on the battlefield. My place, Lysandra replied firmly, is where my gift will be most useful. Malachar is a sorcerer. You'll need someone who can neutralize his magic. Malin touched her shoulder gently. She's right. Lysandra's gift may be our only defense against Malachar's spells. Aldric sighed, knowing he was defeated. Very well, but Cailan will go with you, as he swore. The general nodded solemnly. With my life, if necessary. 3 days later at dawn, the united armies marched. It was a magnificent sight. Thousands of soldiers in perfect formation, red banners of Valdris and blue of Thornmere fluttering side by side. The rising sun reflected on polished armor, raised spears, aligned shields. At the vanguard, King Aldric rode alongside King Theron of Thornmere, who had arrived the previous day. The two monarchs, once mortal enemies, now united in common purpose. Men of Valdris and Thornmere? Aldric's voice echoed over the ranks. Today we don't fight for conquest. We don't fight for revenge. We fight for truth, for justice, for everything that makes our humanity valuable. We were deceived, Theron continued, manipulated to hate each other. But now we see clearly our enemy is not against each other, but against those who would use our lives as pieces in their cruel games. The soldiers struck their weapons on their shields, a rhythmic thunder of determination. While the main army marched along the main route, Lysandra, Leon, Seraphine, Cailan, and 50 of the best warriors from both kingdoms took the secret path through the cliffs. The climb was brutal. Loose rocks crumbled under their feet. Cutting winds threatened to tear them from the stone walls. One soldier lost his footing and would have fallen to his death if Leon hadn't grabbed him at the last second. Continue, Seraphine encouraged. Don't look down, just one step at a time. Lysandra climbed with difficulty, her servant's hands unaccustomed to such physical effort. Cailan remained just below her, ready to support her at any moment. You can do it, he encouraged. You've already done the impossible. A climb is nothing compared to that. After exhausting hours, they reached the top. On the other side of the cliff, they could see the Iron Pass, and there Obsidian's army waited, but they could also see the united armies of Valdris and Thornmere approaching from the front, an unstoppable tide of steel and determination. It's now, Leon whispered. When the battle begins at the front, we attack from behind. The sound of war trumpets echoed through the valleys. The battle had begun. From atop the cliff, Lysandra witnessed horrors she had never imagined. Men clashing in mortal combat, the clash of metal against metal, screams of pain and fury mixed. Blood stained the earth. Bodies fell. But she also saw heroism. She saw soldiers from Valdris protecting wounded from Thornmere. She saw warriors from Thornmere sharing their last arrows with archers from Valdris. She saw two kingdoms fighting as one. "Now," Seraphine ordered. The 50 warriors descended the inner side of the cliff, moving silently through the rear of Obsidian's army. Enemy soldiers, focused on the battle ahead, didn't notice until it was too late. Leon and Seraphine led the assault, their swords cutting through enemy lines with deadly precision. Kalen protected Lysandra like a living wall, his veteran sword striking down anyone who approached. They advanced, creating chaos in the enemy rear. Obsidian soldiers, realizing the attack from behind, began to panic. Their formation broke, confusion spread, and then, from the center of the enemy army, an explosion of black energy. Lord Malachar rose, floating above his troops, his eyes burning with supernatural fury. The wound on his shoulder pulsed with dark magic, not healed but feeding his destructive power. "You!" he roared, seeing Lysandra. "You destroyed everything!" He extended his hands and rays of black energy shot in all directions, disintegrating soldiers from both sides. The air itself seemed to scream under the malignant power. "Lysandra!" Leon shouted. "It's you! Only you can stop him!" Kalen placed himself before her, his shield raised. "Do what you need to do, girl. I'll hold him." Lysandra knelt on the rocky, blood-stained ground in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by death and destruction. And she began to draw the most important drawing of her life. Lysandra's hands trembled as they touched the blood-stained earth. Around her, the battle raged in absolute chaos. But she needed to concentrate. She closed her eyes, blocking out the horror. She dove deep into her interior, into that sacred place where her gift dwelled. She felt her mother's presence, as if Morella were beside her. The purification symbol, the voice echoed in her mind. "The one I taught you in dreams." Lysandra began to draw with her own blood. She cut the palm of her hand with a sharp stone and traced lines in the ground. The pain was intense, but she didn't stop. Above her, Lord Malachar conjured destruction. His black rays vaporized entire soldiers. General Kalen raised his shield, but the dark energy was cracking the metal. "Faster!" Kalen roared. Leon and Seraphine fought desperately but couldn't reach Malachar. "You are insects." The sorcerer laughed. "I am a god!" He channeled all his power into a single spell. A massive sphere of black energy formed above him, sucking the daylight. Nearby soldiers aged rapidly, their lives being drained. "He's going to kill everyone!" Seraphine shouted, horrified. The symbol was almost complete. Lysandra felt her life force draining. Each line tore a piece of her essence. "Lysandra!" Leon reached her side. "You're going to kill yourself." "It's the only way," she whispered. "Then use my blood, my life!" Kalen offered his arm. "And mine." Seraphine cut her own palm. "Mine too." Leon did the same. One by one, the 50 warriors knelt around Lysandra, soldiers from Valdris and Thornmere, offering their lives. "For peace, for truth!" They shouted in unison. Their bloodied hands touched the ground, and the symbol glowed with growing light. Lysandra felt power flow through her. Dozens of lives offered voluntarily, dozens of souls united. The symbol was complete. A column of pure light exploded from the earth. The light engulfed Lysandra, lifting her from the ground. Her eyes glowed with ancestral power. "No!" Malachar tried to release his spell, but it was too late. The light expanded like a wave. Where it touched allied soldiers, it healed wounds and restored strength. But where it touched Malachar's magic, the dark energy dissolved. The sorcerer screamed in agony and fell from the sky. Lysandra descended slowly. The symbol pulsed one last time before going out. Malachar lay broken on the ground. "How?" he whispered. "You lost," Lysandra replied, her voice weak. Soldiers surrounded him with spears. It was over. Lysandra smiled, relieved. Then her legs gave out. Lysandra, Leon caught her. Her face was pale, her lips blue. The symbol had demanded too much life. No! Leon pressed his hands against the wound. Stay with me. We won! Kalen knelt, tears on his face. Please, girl. Malin arrived running, falling to his knees. No, child, not like this. Lysandra looked at the faces around her. It was worth it, she whispered. 2 kingdoms. At peace. Her eyes began to close. Lysandra, no! Leon shook her. I love you. You can't leave without knowing. The darkness pulled her, and then warmth. Her mother's medallion began to glow. Golden light spread from her heart, coursing through her veins. It's not your time, my daughter, Morella's voice echoed. You still have much to do. The wound on Lysandra's palm began to close. Color returned to her face. Her eyes opened. She took a deep breath as if being born again. Lysandra. Leon embraced her, sobbing with relief. You came back. Around them, soldiers fell to their knees in reverence. They had witnessed a miracle. In the sky, the clouds opened. The sun shone gloriously. The war had ended, and light had conquered darkness. 3 days passed since the battle. The field where so many had bled was now a place of healing. Medical tents rose everywhere, and healers from both kingdoms worked side by side, saving lives without distinguishing between Valdris and Thornmere. Lysandra awoke in a luxurious room at Valdris Castle. Soft light entered through the windows, and the aroma of fresh flowers filled the air. Around her, vases overflowed with roses, lilies, and violets, gifts from grateful citizens. The door opened gently. Leon entered carrying a tray with tea and fruits. When he saw she was awake, his face lit up with a smile that would melt the thickest ice. You're awake, he whispered, placing the tray aside and running to her side. The healers said you'd sleep for a week, but I knew you're too strong for that. Lysandra smiled weakly. How long did I sleep? 3 days. 3 days too long. He held her hand gently, as if she were made of glass. I stayed here the whole time. I didn't want you to wake up alone. Leon, she began, but he placed a finger on her lips. Let me speak first. When I thought I'd lose you, on that battlefield, I realized I wasted so much time. Time when I could have said what I felt. Lysandra. He took a deep breath. I love you. From the moment you decided to risk everything for the truth, even when everyone doubted. Your courage, your kindness, your strength. You're extraordinary. Tears glistened in Lysandra's eyes. I love you too, Leon. You believed in me when no one else did. He leaned in and kissed her softly, a kiss full of promise and hope. The door opened again, and Seraphine entered, followed by Malin and General Kalen. All were smiling, though Kalen tried to disguise it by clearing his throat loudly. Sorry to interrupt, Seraphine said with a mischievous smile, but there are many people anxious to see her. In the following hours, Lysandra received visits. Soldiers she had saved, peasants bringing humble gifts, nobles who bowed respectfully. Even children appeared, bringing drawings and wildflowers. When she finally recovered enough strength to stand, Malin led her to a balcony overlooking the castle's main square. What she saw left her speechless. Thousands of people filled the square, citizens from Valdris and Thornmere, mixed, celebrating together. Flags from both kingdoms fluttered side by side. Children played, musicians performed, merchants peacefully exchanged goods. They're waiting for you, Malin said gently. Waiting to thank you. Lysandra descended to the square, supported by Leon. When the crowd saw her, a reverent silence fell. Then, slowly, they began to applaud. The sound grew like a wave, filling the air, making the castle walls themselves vibrate. Lysandra! 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 They chanted her name. She raised her hand, too emotional to speak. People approached, touching her hands, blessing her, crying with gratitude. The next day, a ceremony was held in the Great Hall. King Aldric and King Theron of Thornmere stood side by side on the throne. Between them, a golden scroll rested on a pedestal. the Treaty of Eternal Peace. Let it be known by all, Aldrich proclaimed solemnly, that Valdres and Thornmere are no longer rivals but brothers. This treaty seals our alliance forever. Both kings signed with golden pens, and the crowd exploded in celebration. But the ceremony hadn't ended. Lysandra of Valdres, Aldrich called her, approach. She walked to the throne, nervous but dignified. The king descended the steps and placed his hands on her shoulders. You saved not one, but 2 kingdoms. Your gift, your courage, your sacrifice will never be forgotten. He turned to the crowd. I elevate her to the position of royal advisor, with all the rights and honors that accompany this title. He placed a blue and gold cloak over her shoulders, the united colors of the 2 kingdoms. And let it also be known, Theron added, that the accusation of witchcraft against Mirella, Lysandra's mother, is officially nullified. She was a heroine unjustly executed, and her memory will be honored eternally. Malin approached with tears flowing freely. He opened an ancient box and removed the medallion Lysandra already wore, but now it gleamed restored. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered, kissing her forehead as a father would. General Kalen knelt before her publicly. I swore to protect you with my life, and I keep that oath. You taught me that true strength doesn't come from the sword, but from the heart. Seraphine approached, embracing Lysandra like a sister. You gave me something more precious than peace. You gave me a friend. I promise to visit you always, and when I have children, you'll be godmother to all of them. I would be honored, Lysandra replied, tears of happiness wetting her face. Then Leon stepped forward. To everyone's surprise, he knelt before her. Lysandra. His voice was clear, though laden with emotion. You transformed my life. You showed me what it truly means to fight for what is right. And He took out a simple but beautiful ring from his pocket. I would like to spend the rest of my life by your side. Will you marry me? The hall fell into absolute silence. Lysandra looked at the man kneeling before her, the knight who had risked everything to protect her, the man who loved her not despite her humble origins, but for who she was. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. The hall exploded in joy. Leon slid the ring onto her finger and lifted her in his arms, spinning her while everyone applauded and laughed. Weeks later, the wedding was celebrated, a union that symbolized everything that had happened. Love overcoming barriers, hope conquering despair, light triumphing over darkness. Lysandra wore a simple but elegant dress, white as snow. Leon, in his polished armor, had tears in his eyes when she walked to him. Malon officiated the ceremony, his voice breaking with emotion as he joined their hands. May your love be eternal as the peace you brought to the kingdoms, he declared. In the final scene, years later, Lysandra was on the same kitchen floor where it all began. But now she was no longer a servant. She was an advisor, wife, mother. She drew one last symbol on the floor. A rising sun surrounded by 2 united crowns. Beside her, a small child watched with curious eyes. Mommy, what does it mean? The boy asked. It means hope, my love, Lysandra replied, kissing his forehead. It means that no matter how dark the night, dawn will always come. Outside, on the streets of Valdres and Thornmere, children learned about the servant who saved the world, about courage, humility, and the power to see beyond what eyes can perceive. Peace reigned. Love triumphed. And light would always conquer darkness. The end. Thank you for following this epic journey. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in happy endings. Leave in the comments what was your favorite part of this saga.